Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dreaming Forward podcast. I'm your host, Kalyn Wilson, and today we're going to be continuing our conversation about ESG, and we're going to start to break down the three components of ESG, which is environmental. This is going to be a bit of an alarm sounding, which I know by now most of us have already heard. My entire life. I've been hearing nothing but we got to change. We got to change something. We have to reverse the course. And so this is pretty much going to echo many of the other sentiments that you probably have heard, but with a little bit more of a widened DEI lens. So, just to explain what the environmental component of ESG is, the environmental component looks at the ways in which we engage with the physical world around us. So, how do we utilize scarce resources? How do we create supply chains, pipelines that responsibly use those resources? How do we minimize our negative impact on the earth through waste reduction and responsible waste? We also want to look at how do we create more sustainable products over time, more sustainable use of resources. Again, much of what has been discussed in this particular area, you're probably quite familiar with. This is probably one area where your company has done a significant amount of work. So most companies have done everything from try to use sustainable or compostable or biodegradable silverware or cutlery or cups, or making sure that they're working with companies that only dump in certain places, having the recycling bins in cubicles, et cetera, all the things. But one aspect of the environmental piece I think is important to explore is actually the spiritual component of environmental sustainability. Much of what we are now pushing to do is actually a reflection of the work and the principles and values of many BIPOC communities globally. And the indigenous community in particular stands out because so much of what they have espoused as far as having a true partnership with the earth, of respecting the earth, of treating the earth as a being rather than just an input or a tool, that is really at the heart of a lot of what is being recommended as far as environmental sustainability. So, this is everything from responsible use of water, especially freshwater sources, responsible agricultural practices, responsible food supply practices in general. So, how is food shipped from place to place? Even if you think about the explosion of the whole farm to table movement, a lot of that is being driven by those sustainability efforts and goals. And so, I want us to give appropriate credit to the communities that, in many ways, have been the architects and have been the champions of this long before it became sexy to companies. As your company seeks to do more of the reconciliation work that I mentioned in episode 9, a part of that reconciliation is giving not only the appropriate credit to the communities that develop the ideas, but bringing them into the table and to the table as partners. So if you find that your company has no awareness, especially if you are based here in the United States, if you have no awareness of the original indigenous communities who occupied the land on which your headquarters or your offices sit, I would encourage you to educate yourself on those groups. If you do not have any partnerships with indigenous groups to understand, again, those principles for responsible use of Earth's resources, etc., I would encourage you to start, because to be quite honest, that I can think of, I don't know too many other communities that have such an incredible pulse on the ways to responsibly use Earth's resources like the indigenous community. And they deserve to be credited for that intelligence. They deserve to be credited for that knowledge. The reason why I said that it is almost a spiritual practice is because much of business relies on what we can see and touch. We want to make money. We want to make products. We want to have the document to prove that we performed a service. And a lot of the environmental work that we plan to do relies on us believing in something that we can't see and a legacy that we'll never experience. So the idea of someone saying, if we don't fix this by 2050, the earth will be uninhabitable. It's 2022. So 38 years from now, will I even be alive? What will I be doing? That's too far out to really care about, because right now we need to get our quarter 3 revenues up. We need to set our quarter 1 projections. And that short-sightedness, that ignorance of the things that we can't touch and can't see, if we're not careful, it'll be our downfall. And so, not to espouse any particular religion or spiritual beliefs, but again, I'm talking about spiritual as an umbrella for the unknown and the respect that we have for that. So the idea that we shouldn't just work the ground until it is completely exhausted. So if you think about the food that we eat, and this is something I have to check myself on too. Do I really need fresh, super ripe strawberries in January? No, it's not going to kill me to wait until June and July. Do I really need the freshest, crispest apples in May? No, I can wait until September, October. And so, how do we train ourselves to use the resources? Do I really need to run the sprinklers for 2 hours in a day? No, I could go out, spray my little flowers before the sun comes up fully and keep it going, right? These are little things that, yes, we can change individual behaviors, but it's particularly important for companies because there is a compounding effect. So when we think about the amount of trash that large companies, if your building has 10,000 people in it, which is not uncommon for certain businesses, that's a lot that we are polluting the environment to do. I think the pandemic showed a lot of it, especially with working from home. My goodness, look at the air quality changing so significantly when it's not all these cars on the road. What does that impact do for our overall health? What does that impact for our mental health? What is the impact of people being happier? What is the impact of people feeling less stressed and wanted to drink more water or exercise or wanted to be outside? And so even how we set up our work environments to make it so that people want to engage with the earth can bring and drive a greater awareness, which could change choices too. So I'll give an example of that. And this actually gets into the concept of ergonomics, or what is called human factors. It's an area of organizational psychology that deals with how you set up work environments and workspaces to help people thrive. And I remember there are 3 main aspects of ergonomics, but one in particular is called psychosocial. And the psychosocial component of ergonomics addresses how our engagement with the environment can quite literally shift the way we show up mentally in that environment. So one of the key examples that they always used in the textbook was around the concept of time. So if you think about certain work environments, the pace can be so grueling that it feels like time just flies by. Versus if you think about maybe an engineer or someone who does creative work, maybe a graphic designer, they may work in blocks of time where they have 3 hours blocked off on their calendar to just ideate or create or sit and reflect and think about a problem and think about how to solve it. And so the factory worker who is packing boxes or who is putting doors onto cars will have a very different perception of time than the engineer or the graphic designer, even though time is fairly static. An hour is 60 minutes, a minute is 60 seconds, etc. But our perception of time is changed drastically by our work environment. And so that is an aspect of environmental sustainability as well, that we can set up work environments to be so supportive or so degrading that people are not even able to appropriately perceive the environment around them. I'll give an example. If you have a work environment where there are no windows, there are no places really for people to sit and relax if they're on a break. There are no places where people to move to just get a change of scenery, just to think. You may find that people take more frequent smoke breaks. You may find that people gravitate toward eating quote unquote unhealthy foods. You may find that people get sick more frequently. You may find that people sit in their car and run their car, which is polluting the air. So, again, these are all secondary effects of this that are happening on what could be considered such a micro and localized level that they don't hit the radar, but the impact on the local community is so great. We can't always focus the environmental efforts on the ocean or deforestation. That is extremely important. Please do not misunderstand me. But there are ways that we set up our work environments to also create these small micro effects, which can be just as damaging, especially to local communities. So again, just thinking of those psychosocial aspects of your work environment has a huge impact on the environment around you. The other thing to consider is the sunken cost fallacy of hybrid or in-person working. Let's keep it real. Most people know that a lot of companies are forcing folks to come back to the office because, number one, folks at the top just feel like it's better, whether or not that's actually true. But also, most companies have invested a whole lot of money into real estate, whether that is renting the high rises or building a campus or renting some space. And we don't like to lose that money. But at some point, just like when you got to admit, okay, listen, we've been married 20 years. I can't do another 5. It's over with. Sometimes you just got to know when to let go. And for some companies, it's time to let go. It's time to let go or reshape and repurpose. And it's interesting because this is an aspect, a little bit of the social piece, but I'm going to keep it in environmental. If you think about how much actual space has been eaten up by corporate headquarters and corporate real estate and building, that could have been housing, that could have been schools, that could have been recreational centers, parks, nursing homes, gyms, all types of things that the community needed. And so rather than just think, oh, we're not going to lose this money, repurpose it for something that actually could be more sustainable for the environment in the long run, again, within that community. And that could end up showing up as a rec center for the kids or a new park so that you have trees and green space, a community garden so that people have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, especially for places that are considered food deserts, excuse me. So all of these things matter. This is something that you can do to change the community around you. Again, it matters greatly what we do all around the globe, and we should not ignore that. But I think there are deeper efforts that we could be doing locally. The last point that I'll make about all of this, I do want everyone who's listening to be aware that folks are really pushing for this reconciliation piece. So I talked about that in another episode. People are not just accepting that, oops, sorry, let's move on. They want to know, what are you going to do to course correct, to reimburse, to give reparations for what you've done wrong, particularly as an environmental impact. So you probably just saw the story about developing, suing developed countries to say, where our money? Right? You all are doing things that are causing a disproportionate negative impact on us. We need you to compensate us for that. And your company needs to be ready for that. Because if you know that you're one of the main culprits, governments aren't just going to be forking over that money. they're going to be asking you for that. And so I want you to start thinking about, how can I get ahead of that? Because it's always better to be the first to do something. And so if you think about when you were a kid and you did the dishes before your parents had to ask, it was like, oh, little Johnny tried. All right, they could play the game. I'm not going to. Okay, they could go outside with their friends. It's all good. They tried. But if they had to tell you 3 times to do it, now you're getting behind. And so when you get behind, you are at the mercy of that person's emotion, of the anger that they felt at having to tell you things multiple times. If you get ahead of it, you get to set the standard, and then you get to set your pace as well. Because now you've come in first to say, hey, here's what we're willing to do and how we can scale it. So which would you rather be? The pioneer and the innovator, or the person that they had to drag into reconciliation? It's your choice, but that day is coming, particularly since the global majority is considered people of color. And those groups have traditionally been marginalized in the business world, especially for companies based in the United States. But that's not the reality any longer. And so as these companies come together and form new power bases, the livelihood of your company, the sustainability of your company is going to depend upon your willingness to, again, get ahead of the demands which are growing for this. So, which aspect of environmental sustainability stands out most to you? Is there something that I missed? I know for a lot of people, this is their area of expertise and life's work. So, I will be very interested in hearing and seeing in the comments, what do you think? Again, what stands out most to you? What did I miss? Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Share your thoughts here, and follow us on social media as well. Until next time, take care.